Welcome back for part 4, reacting to the Eric Weinstein, Terrence Howard episode 22171 of JRE, Joe Rogan Experience.
So there's no reason to do
It's the
that.
12th, the 29th, 50th.
Before I get started, I did the first 3. They are now accepted on YouTube, so thanks Spotify. They gave the approval for the fair use. So hopefully this one goes the same if it gets blocked by YouTube algorithm. But yeah, so we're gonna react to the final part. I'm jumping in, I think, like a couple minutes into what I finished on. So we'll just go from there. So this is part 4 of my reactions.
Yeah. Now, my claim is that you pulled off the same thing by finding a cheat. But it's a good lie. The third is an abomination. It's not until you get to 53 notes.
Somewhere over the rainbow, birds fly.
Way up high. Let me see, what would it be?
I feel like I'm in a boxcar.
I feel like I'm on the launching pad where the UFO lands on Close Encounters.
Do, 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 do,
All right,
do.
somewhere is a doubling of
Yeah.
frequency, right?
Right.
The doubling is perfect. The fifth is a lie, but it's a good lie. The third is an abomination. It's not until you get to 53 notes, which the Turks use, that you get a better fifth and a better third. You get a better fifth at 29 notes per scale,
Yes.
and you get a worse third. So there's no reason to do
It's the
that.
12th, the 29th, 53rd.
Yeah. Now, my claim is that you pulled off the same thing by finding a cheat in inside of the linchpin, which is why it's genius. And I don't even think you know how genius this thing is my guess.
I'm about to show you noble gas,
Oh,
and
stop
I'm
it.
going to show
You're
you
gonna
matter.
fuck the whole thing up.
So,
Listen to me. The number of edges in a tetrahedron is what?
and the tetrahedron is
6.
6.
And that's why you have 6 pentagons. But these 6 pentagons are not, either they're not perfect or they're not joined perfectly. You put 6 motors in these things with propellers, and you have 6 degrees of freedom.
Here you go.
You have an object. So we talk about pitch, roll, and yaw. But those are basically, if I understand correctly, the basis vectors for the Lie algebra of SO3 or spin 3 or SU2.
What's Lie algebra?
Well, so the idea is I have a rotation group of symmetries of this object about its central vertex. Okay?
Right.
And that's one of the things. You can put one of these things up, and with 3 degrees of freedom, I can spin it, right, like a full-on UFO, and just have it moving in crazy ways that nothing else can move. Because a quadcopter has only 4 degrees of freedom because it's got the 4 motors.
This is unlimited.
Okay. Well, but it's going to distract us. Let's
Why,
get to
that's
that in 1 second because
Okay.
it's super cool.
Okay.
By the way, that's a CGI.
Yes,
but I've
that's a
actually
CGI.
seen
I'm gonna
I've
show
seen
you the
guy
real
actually flying this around, so I don't want to
Yeah,
do
we've
this.
got like 19 of them. That's actually.
So what's going on with this is that you have 3 degrees of freedom, which is the rotations.
Pardon me, I know I'm kind of half paying attention as I have set up here. Holy crap, I'm out of shape. Seeing from this angle. Certain clothes also help hide the things, I feel like. Anyway, that's just things that a decade of research have led to, coupled with a generally sedentary lifestyle. Fuck.
That I need here. But you've got 3 extra degrees of freedom to move in different places. Now, there's something called the affine group, which is the semi-direct product of SO3 with the R3 group of trans.
I'm just like half paying attention and paying attention to myself too much. I get it. It's probably weird. What is up with this dude? Just imagine that you anticipated everyone to judge the living shit out of you because you had something important to say or you wanted to talk to everyone. And you were concerned. So you're trying to like prepare for that type of thing. But sometimes you're like, ah, shit, I got a weak point here. I got attack. It's fucking attack. Even if it's not like the merits of my work, it's still like, I mean, it's a fair weak point. Like, dude, get your shit together, bro. Fair, but also like lacking that I have spent a decade doing what I'm doing with no compensation and no employment really to do it, so it's all on my own. I mean, it's not a simple task. Some things got put by the wayside. Okay, so back to what he's talking about. Now that I've kind of derailed the conversation, maybe, but so be it. This is just my reaction. This is what's happening, I guess. It's kind of weird. It's like too far over. And I like that. I didn't want to like move the camera. Maybe I'll just move the camera. This camera sucks. It's not as high quality as that camera. So I was avoiding it, but I'll just move me because they're gonna probably. I also kind of cut off some things, like some backpacks I put there. I'll just cut them off, leave them sitting there. Oh, now you see my methodology. It's all these things, my jars of things that I use at times.
Translation.
And SO3 has 8. It introduces the chromatic aspect of.
Don't go chromatic. Just
Don't go chromatic,
You've got
okay.
something brilliant.
Okay, I'm listening. I'm just trying to understand.
The best thing that I've seen out of Terrence Howard, I will tell people, this is why you never throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Before they move on from music, bravo to whatever Eric just said. I don't really know music like that, but it sounds like he's pretty well, like in my, not just here, but in other places where I've listened to him talk about playing music and music theory. Like he clearly thinks about it, spends time researching in his own way, you know, as we do, just learning about something we're interested in. He clearly learns about music, so he's interestingly prepared for this topic in that way that he just talked about. I don't really understand, but I do know music scales are essentially assigned and not like a actual thing that like tangibly and fundamentally exists. It's an assigned value that's agreed upon, where like a certain note is a certain frequency, and that's the scales. But that's just established across time. Is that really the note, the tone? I don't know. I mean, it's debatable, which is kind of what he was just getting at, I think, essentially, that this is, maybe I'm not summarizing it and putting it more in my own spin of viewpoint and not giving really a good representation of what he was trying to get at. I don't even know. I've listened to it a couple times now because I was trying to find where I was and to go back. Anyway. Okay.
And I don't know that you invented it. I think you did.
I did invent it.
I promise you, I think
No,
you did.
I didn't invent it. It was given to me. An angel gave that to me, and I'm sorry that everybody.
Terrence, I'm
don't
sorry to
believe in
say
that.
this. There's a way in which we all feel pressure to give away the genius stuff that we do to some other.
Notice it says competition. I know it's really small lettering, and this bar won't go away, but it says competition. Terrence Howard's linchpin competition. So essentially, he put out this, like, can anyone make this kind of thing, and with his being Terrence Howard, was able to get people who actually participated to a point where they made functional things. Whether or not, like, the question, like the control to really test this would be to do arbitrary setups that aren't the ones that Terrence Howard put forth, and see if they do the same or similar or other things that, like, say, 7-sided, 8-sided, whatever sided amounts of things, and all the things of angles to create different, like, amounts of propellers. Did those also function in a way that makes this, what this thing can do, less interesting? Because it can, I mean, it literally can go do, and, like, rotate at any angle and float there at that angle, it seems, which is pretty cool. I mean, whether or not that's useful, and, like, he describes it as being able to replace, like, cranes lifting shipping containers. I'm like, I don't see how these things could do that, and in any, like, energetically efficient way. Like, it would take thousands and thousands of them, and they'd probably, like, not be able to get so close to one another where the airflow is, like, kind of messed up if they're too, like, packed in, so that it almost has to be like a single layer, potentially, or a few layers, something less. I mean, maybe it can become just completely large, any size, arbitrary size, but does that really have the power to lift thousands of pounds at a time without, like, burning the totality of the battery almost instantly? Because they would be battery powered. Like, it's not like they would be solar powered while they're doing this. That wouldn't handle, or whatever powered, unless we got some other power source, but that's not something he's really proposed whatsoever, as far as I know. Some other, like, actual way of drawing power from the universe, essentially. I've not heard of such a thing, so I just don't see it being capable of doing what he says it can do. So let's go ahead and carry on. But that's my, like, disclaimer as I'm reacting. Like, I've seen this, I watched this video, and I've already talked about it. So to incorporate that here before we even look at it, I'm probably going to have that reaction. So let's see what they have to say.
Higher power. This is why if you ask, like, Khabib Nurmagomedov, like, how do you do such great things? He'll say, mashallah, or astaghfirullah, right?
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, right?
Inshallah.
Because Islam is very good about, you always give away the compliment because you can't hold it because it'll cause you an ego distortion. This thing here has 6 degrees of freedom based on the relative speeds of the motors that you put into it. Plus, there's an affine group called SO3 semi-direct product R3, which has 6 Lie algebra elements. That means that this thing can potentially span the Lie algebra. And if you have a trackball over here as a controller, and you put, like, 3 theremins so that you could control in 3-dimensional space, you could potentially have a drone that can rotate itself in 3 dimensions and get anywhere based on these 6 objects. Now, I could be wrong about that.
No, you're right. We've actually done that. So,
Okay. So my claim is, if the only thing you'd done, forget the art, forget the science, forget the this, forget the that, if the only thing you did was to introduce an error, which is 109.47 is not exactly 108.
But 108 is that key of A, which is.
God damn it, you won't stop.
I'm not stopping. I'm working with you.
I know.
Keep going.
All
All right. You talk.
That is a really cool grade A idea until I hear that somebody else did it, or that when you machine this, because this is the thing.
Now, this is when you put 4
Okay.
of them together.
Now, the thing is, it's very cool if you take what Intel does with drones, where they sort of synchronize these swarms. This thing comes together, and it forms a stable structure. Now, if you look at it, the tolerances that you've built into this thing, because these pentagons do not exactly come together.
109.47.
It's not 108. That thing within engineering is like even temperament. Even temperament is a lie. It's a fraud. But oh my God, all the most beautiful music in the world is built on even temperament.
But look at what it generates.
That's what I'm talking about.
You put four of these come together and make this. 4 of these come together and they make this larger structure that is the same exact thing. So that's not
Terrence,
a lie.
It is a lie.
This
You're
right
trying to
here
build the whole universe off of the linchpin.
I'm defining something new.
You are.
That's a good point. You're trying to build an entire universe off the linchpin. Is effectively what he's doing. Whether or not it's like an interesting flight thing that they're talking about doesn't really relate to these other details of the whole universe. Yes, like that can happen as he's describing, but other shapes do that too, like cubes can just stack. Sure, they don't attach the same way per se, but they can have nubs like Legos and like little crevices for the nubs to go. That naturally may form. That might just be like a thing that tends to happen. And all the other crystal like crystalline structures, crystalline lattices, like those things are not the same. There's many crystal lattices. So like, do they all come from this linchpin? That doesn't really make sense. They would seem to all, like, if there was a single thing of that nature, it would probably just produce more things of that nature. Kind of like a species. It probably, though, would not produce different things on the same scale. Like, yes, if you could zoom in on some fractal aspect of it, maybe you would see it branch out into some other structures, but if you were to be looking at, like, this general scale of the structure, it wouldn't also simultaneously yield some other structure at this scale. Probably not at the smaller scale, really, but I'm just giving some, like, leeway to the potential that it could yield, like, on different levels, some differences, but within one level of, like, atoms. I don't see how crystal lattices of, like, the different, like, cubic, face-centered, I don't remember. Whatever the lattices are, I don't see how they would all emerge from this. So the whole universe, like, anyway, exactly. It's too far without additional reasoning to why it gets there.
To the best of my knowledge, by the way, I looked at this years ago. Wait.
Hold on. No. Before you go there, this is the other side of it.
Yeah.
This is what's very interesting. Like these, they'll come together and meet. You can see where they meet up.
Yeah.
Their natural meeting up.
Yeah.
Now this one looks exactly like this one, but they don't have the same mixture. So what this is creating, this is actually showing. This is the equal and opposite. This is matter. This becomes the antimatter of it.
I can't stop you doing that.
You can't stop me. I'm so sorry. I'm my own worst enemy and my own best friend.
You know what? That was a beautiful statement.
But what I'm trying to say is the fact that they keep, and these four will keep. This is just the magnetic, what I consider the magnetic field.
You see, you stopped yourself. I really appreciate
consider this to be the magnetic field because they're expanding at the center, and magnetism, in my language, magnetism expands out and becomes greater.
And you know when you just said "in my language"?
In my language.
That's what I just did with the Terrence product. In other words,
said in your language.
I'm trying to get you to stop pissing my community off.
What about that structure is the shape of a magnetic field? There's just nothing about it that's really like a magnetic field because it's just not how magnetic fields form. Magnetic fields are a result of ethereal flows of particles that are so infinitesimal that they've been dismissed offhandedly as not existing, known as ether. Because the universe is composed of an infinite scale of particles. And we are just composed of one of them. And once we're composed of one of these particles, atoms, one range of particles, we then literally observe our surroundings of the other particles. Larger particles then become stars, planets, stars, black holes, and so on. And smaller ones become atoms, which we then see as our actual building blocks, electrons, photons, and then things we don't see anymore because it's too subtle, ether. And the larger something is, the less abundant they are. Like there's only like one central nucleus to a galaxy system, black hole. Maybe there's other black holes in a galaxy, but there is a nucleus system. A solar system is a star at the center. A planetary system, the planet itself, the nucleus of an atom. They're all like a single system. What was I saying? Oh yeah, but the large ones are less abundant because they're large, essentially, so they're far more spaced out. Whereas the subtler ones become so subtle that they're essentially everywhere. They're so abundant that they're everything. There's just an infinite amount of it in everything because it's so subtle that there's like an infinite amount of these particles in a very, very small amount of space everywhere, in like the polar opposite to this one system that's like like the largest system in an observable universe. That system, opposite to it, is the ether, which is infinite in number, infinitesimal in mass, and then moves all around according to the laws of motion. And that gets drawn by gravity, which is effectively induced by the laws of motion. But where two systems in these flows of ether block the flows so that the surrounding pressure of ether is actually higher than the pressure in the direction of the other system. So there's a low pressure that moves it towards it. This is called Lesagé's gravity. I didn't come up with this. I just fine-tuned it by saying there's this gradient of particles. There's not corpuscles, some type of elementary particle that's just like a rough non-gradient perspective. Really, it's an infinite gradient that fills it all of the subtlest space with these infinitesimal particles relative to atoms. But like that's just relative to atoms. Any system can be an observer's building block, and then their dimension of reality, of the infinite dimensions of the universe that are all within the one universe. Like, it's infinite, but then there's observers like us who aren't just composed of what we're composed of, because that's what we're composed of. So of course everyone's composed of that, and any observer must be composed of atoms. No, they can be composed of anything. It's just then they will see those things as atoms, whether it be black holes, photons, and in their perception of the systems will shift like turning a dial, so that they're at a different dimension in the universe, even though it's all one physical system that's behaving under these simplistic mechanisms, so that when the ether surrounding a system flows into it by gravity, essentially, it goes through it, though, because it's subtle enough. If it's subtle enough, so there's kind of like a filtration process. Like, if it's not subtle enough, it hits the crust, gets absorbed. If it's subtle enough, it goes through. Those subtle particles continue through, though, because of momentum, where they, even though they're going to the center of gravity, they go past the center of gravity because they just go right through it, and then they continue out the other side. But then the direction of gravity and the pressures of the ether around it literally pushes it back to the system, and it flows back through, and that produces a figure 8 orbit structure around a system, whatever the system is, Earth, a star, which also depends on the system rotation. If it's not rotating, then it's perfectly balanced, so there's no like tug to him. So when a system goes through, like an ether particle goes through the center of gravity, even though the direction of gravity is behind it, it's going so straight into that pressure that it doesn't bend off of the track, so it keeps going and doesn't yield a magnetic field of the same strength unless it's spinning, so that it's much more subtle and undetectable unless the system has a rotation. So rotation is very tied to magnetic fields, not like anything to do with a shape that's related to some kind of the linchpin thing. And that is what a magnetic field is, though, is a trapped current flow of ether that a system is just gravitationally keeping within its boundaries, and it's flowing through its actual center of mass and propagating as a current, though, like a river of particles of ether, which, if we could zoom in on them, would just look like our surroundings. It wouldn't be any different. That's what an infinite cosmos is like. Like, truly infinite. Zooming in on the ether, we would just see like what we see now. There would be some other observers who are actually see what we see as their relative ether. Who would be like, zooming in on the ether, we would see some observers who are seeing their surroundings like us. Maybe this whole thing plays out across all the dimensions. I don't know. That would be kind of cool if the whole story played out across dimensions, where like different scales of so like imagine the physical, every motion of the story is like integral to the layers underneath it propagating to like have the same outcome, so that the story is kind of like the linchpin, where it's fractally everywhere. plausible, but like in a way where it all needs to be that way so that like that dimension motions interact into this dimension at this time to lead to this event that leads to this thing that leads to this, all while like someone's just like sipping a cup of water on some other dimension that if they didn't, they would it just wouldn't, like, the universe would cease to exist, or not sipping, like being, or like some like stubbornness, like oh, why are you being so stubborn, and never realizing like every single detail has to be just so for the universe to be able to be stable across all the dimensions. Okay, sorry, pardon me. Let's go.
I don't want to piss them off.
I
I
know.
want friends. I need friends.
Terrence, that's why we're here, right?
But this
Okay.
right here, when you have and these will keep bonding with greater ones and keep making the same
The point
structure.
is, it's good enough within engineering tolerances to be a dodecahedron.
This dodecahedrons are. I'm not going to teach.
Now,
I'm sorry.
if Jamie, can we bring up T4 bacteriophage capsid? Because I think, do you know about what a capsamere is?
No.
All right.
I know what a pap smear is.
It's the second
had
time you
one
did that.
last
I
week.
enjoyed both
What?
of them. Okay.
I think you got a bad doctor.
Okay. Now, let's do the one below the cartoon. So you see where it says collared sheath? Let's do, yeah.
Oh, those are those quick things that run along. They move so very quickly along.
No, you're
this-
talking about something else. You're talking about a transport thing. This
Yeah,
is a
this like
virus.
this is a virus. It looks like the transport thing.
This is phage lambda. And what this thing is, that thing is an icosahedral capsid. So all of the nucleic acid is upstairs in that compartment, but it's not a perfect icosahedron because it has the elongation of some triangles and the truncation of others. Now this thing is an example of imperfection in nature, right? So nature wanted to do something very rigid to protect the nucleic acid by coming up with an icosahedron, but she didn't do a perfect one. Can we find any other that, like, you see above that one, that's way too perfect. It's not true. That's a good one. So in some sense, what you find often enough is that nature actually chooses imperfect perfection.
Nested.
Yeah.
They're just
And
nesting instead of.
Now, what the way this works, can we look up capsomere? Again, I'm way out of my element. C-A-P-O,
Something different.
C-A-P-S-O, capsomere. Yeah. And then images. So the idea is that you have these little units, which are very much like your drone units, your linchpins, that come together to form capsids. So can you hold up one that in case is a dodecahedron?
Oh,
like right here.
Yeah.
So that is like a capsid made from capsomeres. So I want you to spend some time on the protein data bank. Maybe let's go to the protein PDB capsomere. And you'll get an understanding of all the ways in which nature has been doing this engineering that we've been learning from. Maybe actually just go to the site PDB. Yeah, let's try that. Herpes. Basically, what these are little nature's version of linchpins that come together to form platonic solids, which are the triangular platonic solids are valued because the triangle is a stable structure. If you think about a square can become a parallelogram very easily. So they're not very, engineers will use triangles over squares. What you need to do, in my opinion, is to figure out the Eternal One's understanding of these structures and how he or she creates these things with the stability that actually use the imperfections just the way you were using the imperfections. And by the way, I did look at this years ago and totally discarded it because 108 wasn't equal to 109.47.
Right.
It's close. And the fact that you're willing to deal with something doped with imperfection is what actually is the genius akin to even temperament.
Well, it's like, how do you walk? You don't walk by a perfect gait.
Yeah.
You walk by moving past the point of equilibrium and catching yourself.
Well
it's
said.
the catching.
I don't know how to think like that. I think perfectly, not imperfectly, and it's to my detriment in many situations.
Well, you've got an incredible mind.
As do you,
can
sir.
recall stuff.
Can we go back to the main page? Because another thing that I see you taking a lot of guff for is the periodic table. Now, I don't like your periodic table, but you are also the only person I know who's pushing into the public consciousness the understanding. Okay, so first of all, do you know Stanley Jordan?
Not by name. You
right.
smoke weed?
Stanley Jordan is one of the, I don't even want to call him a guitarist. He's an alien intelligence from another universe. But if you go up and you click that, people have been saying that Terrence Howard is making up this thing about the periodic table and the sound of the elements. And I want you to hear what he calls sonification.
The ionization energies of the elements as represented here in a periodic table, and we are going to produce tones representing those energies. The way that this app works is each one of these elements in the table is actually a push button, and I can play tones with these push buttons. The settings in this control panel here will determine how those energies will be converted into tones that we can hear. First of all, we're just going to look at a few of the controls for now. See, we have transpose frequency. The frequencies corresponding to these ionization energies are extremely high, so we have to transpose them down to a range that
As you said.
So here we're going to transpose it down. In this case, 42 octaves, negative 42. So let's start with hydrogen. If I transpose it 43 octaves down, I get that tone. Or I can go 44 octaves down. I can also transpose it chromatically. As you can see here, I can go up and up again and up again. But normally I set that at 0 and just leave it there, and I only change the octave. Let's go back to 42, and I'm going to show you some of the other controls that we have here. The duration is in seconds, so here we go, 1 second long. Or we could go longer, let's say 2 seconds. And the damping factor controls how quickly the tone decays. 3 is kind of like a nice...
So what he's doing is he's preparing you for the fact that he's going to play the periodic table. And by the way, I just want to say this thing. Stanley Jordan is a friggin' mega genius.
I see that now.
And what you're talking about, I was talking with him about several years ago, and what he was going to do is to mine the periodic table for the music of the elements and also go beyond that for molecules.
See, I tried to do the same thing, and I called
People treat you like you're nuts.
UCLA asking for the prime resonant frequency of the elements, and they wouldn't give them to me. Nobody would give them to
Well,
me.
because in part, wait, listen to this.
boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon. Now, what happens is, as you start listening to these, you start to notice
That's
patterns.
an E
Let me
sharp.
go and go through this second row again, but I won't say them. I'll just go ahead and play through them. Kind of a beautiful melody, isn't it? Now, these pitches that we're hearing are determined straight from a calculation based on the actual energy of the element. So we are getting tones that you couldn't necessarily play on a piano. A lot of them would fall in between the keys. So they don't fit our conventional
They're
Western
sense sharp or
musical
sense flat.
pitch system. But if you want it to fit, we can enable this. It says quantized pitch. So all these pitches are slid to the nearest note.
So when you
in the
say key of
chromatic
E.
scale. The chromatic scale just means all of the notes that we could play on a
And
piano.
I'm
That's
talking
the best
about
way to
432
explain it.
when I'm talking
What I'm
about the
gonna
key
do is
of
I'm gonna go through
E
these again a little
on
bit
it.
quickly,
Well, you
and
make
I'm
an
gonna
error
shorten the
again.
duration.
So you say this thing about hydrogen 40.5.
Well, no, I wasn't
wait,
saying.
wait a
no,
second,
no,
wait a second.
But I wasn't saying that hydrogen is 40.5. I was saying that the key of E is 40.5 hertz and doubles to 162. Those things.
Yeah, but you said it in a
move-
very authoritative way. And the
but
one
you-
and the
if-
40.5 is not 40.5 hertz. It's 40.5 megahertz, associated not with hydrogen but with mercury.
But you have to keep once you keep doubling that.
But wait a
you'll
second,
get
Terrence.
to the
You activated a bunch of chemists who said, "I don't know this frequency."
because they're looking at 440. They're looking at their
No, 440 is
they changed
irrelevant.
their 440 to it.
440 is concert A in a time when we've decided that that is concert A. If you were to use the Hindustani system, let's say, instead of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do,
It was ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la.
no, they do sa, re, ga, ma, pa, sa, re, ga, pa, da, pa, ga, sa, re, ga, re, sa, re. They use a
I
different...
did the Cephalgians. I did the
I know.
Cephalgian skill. That's what I
But I'm
did.
saying this is that for North India, right? It's an irrelevancy because everybody's allowed to tune their sa to a different tone. They don't have to tune their sa around A440 because there's only 3 instruments. There's a tabla which doesn't have that tone as an important part. There's a tanpura which is tuned to the soloist, and the soloist determines what their sa should be. So can we do sa re ga? So in that system, the absolute value doesn't matter because you can tune it to whatever you want to tune it. You're not trying to come up with an orchestra. It's only the orchestral aspect of Western music and the need for even temperament that forces us all to listen to the concertmaster as to what A440 is, right? Okay.
Joseph Goebbels pushed that around the world.
Okay, let's not do Joseph Goebbels. Just keep drinking whiskey. What you have is a situation in which nobody understood what you said about the periodic table, except for a tiny number of people. Now, if we go to that page, Jamie, that we put up, back below that, The Sound of Hydrogen from WSU. So this is an academic page dedicated to the idea that you're trying to figure out how to play these things, and this is the sonification. Now, you attribute more meaning to this, I think, but you need to know about a guy named Luca Turin, who's a buddy of mine in the UK at Buckingham University, which is trying to do some wild radical stuff. They are working on the idea that smell is not based on shape, but is based on frequency of the valence electrons, and that particles that vibrate the same way smell the same, even if the shapes are different. And if their shapes are very similar, but their vibrations are very different, they don't smell the same. So there's an entire book called The Emperor of Scent about the academic, like all the people who try to push you down. They're trying to push Luca Turin down, as if he doesn't know what's going on. He's written the Bible of perfume. I don't know if you like scent.
I do.
He understands the vibratory quality of scent. And so trying to sort of synesthese these things by saying that everything that has frequency and vibration can be understood in each other's terms is a small freak community of very smart people trying to do what it is you're doing. The only problem is you gave us, people ask me for an analogy. What do you think of Terrence Howard? That's all I got for like a week. Can we pull up the
Terrence Howard.
I'm just gonna interrupt here because I haven't for a while, and then since it's a reaction video, he's making good points. I'm not that like studied on music and these topics he's talking about, so I really have nothing to add except for it sounds good. That was pretty interesting. Also, that Stanley, that periodic table thing he was showing.
Or Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah, no. We're having that right now. The Janet, it'll come up as Janet left step periodic table. What you did to the periodic table was, by the way, what a gift. That I hate the periodic table. Can't stand it. The problem is, I had to analogize when people ask me what I thought of it. Let's click on that thing. That periodic table is one of the alternate periodic tables that's much more in favor with people who are mathematically minded like you are, rather than the Walter Russell periodic table. Because what this does is it uses the quantum mechanics to stop with those exceptions. Isn't it weird that there's like a footnote in the middle of the standard periodic table in which you just say, well, these things are exceptions to the rule? This is an attempt to use the electron orbitals in terms of the spherical harmonics, where you're looking at complex valued functions on the two-dimensional sphere. And the sort of Aufbau principle, imagine that there was only a Coulomb potential centered at the origin in the hydrogen situation. You would go along and say hydrogen first, helium, then lithium, then beryllium, then boron, carbon, nitrogen, etc. And this is the way in which you would build up the outer shells of the electrons, in which you have this principal quantum number, which is basically the energy level, but then the L quantum number is what we would call a highest weight for a highest weight representation of SU2 or spin 3, which is the double cover of SO3. Mm-hmm. That first one is one-dimensional, but it's spin up and spin down, so you get two elements. The next one is going to be three-dimensional, but you're going to get 6 elements. And then you're going to get 5-dimensional because it's SO3 that determines the representation theory. This thing is what I wish you had given us, rather than the Walter Russell thing, which is sort of a historical artifact. Now, no offense, but the big problem is that if you are trying to talk about, like, hydrogen, and then you imagine...
Let's be fair now. We already have that because he just pulled it up. The thing with the periodic table is it's not like some fundamental thing. It's more just a way of displaying information in a concise tabular table. It's not like it's like some law So, unless it's really depicting something of that nature, which is kind of what Terrence Howard is leaning towards in his suggestion, at least, and albeit it's Walter Russell's table. But like to supplant the periodic table doesn't even make sense. Like it makes sense to use multiple periodic tables. Like, oh, here's another one. Cool. What is this one's benefit? Well, it really shows this aspect a little better than those ones. Oh, yeah, but it sucks and like it doesn't capture anything. The one we typically use captures. Like that one's the one for a reason. It's not an accident. It's not arbitrarily chosen. It really is very good at displaying what it displays. It just doesn't care per se about like why, like what is going on. It's just here's the information. So it's not displayed in a way that really is helpful to understanding more fundamentally. It just is here's how things work that we can tell. Anything that's hydrogen typically has this atomic mass based on the isotopes and percentage isotopes accounted for and blah blah blah. All the details. These are these ones, those are those ones, like metals, etc. So even if a new periodic table truly is made, it can be used in conjunction with the present one. So there's no, the argument of replacing a periodic table doesn't even make sense. It's not really thinking through what the periodic table even is. It's just like viewing it as something that has flaws. Sure, like it definitely does. And maybe there is a truly better way to display it, all the information, without any of the flaws, in a just better way. But it has to, any better way literally has to incorporate all the information of the current periodic table and more to make it obsolete. And since it's not being made obsolete by any of these other periodic tables, the only thing we can say is that they would be good, potentially, if they're true, to be used in conjunction with the current periodic table.
Carbon is an octave above, I think is what you said. Doubling the frequency. What is that thing below hydrogen? And you say, no, it's too dense to be perceived. Like, bullshit.
But there is ultra low frequencies, even though we cannot hear it.
Yes, but
there's ultra low frequencies, and that's what I'm saying. My
that's
problem
where your
with,
analogy broke down,
with
Terrence.
no, because hydrogen sits in the same exact position as carbon does when you're looking at it.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't come off at the same coloration. It doesn't have the same tone.
Terrence, you're talking about a periodic table from like 1926, something like that. And Walter Russell had some decent intuitions that he instantiated terribly. Now look at all this shit that you're doing. And look at the fact that he's locked in 1926. Dirac is not going to come up with the Dirac equation to supersede the Schrodinger equation for another 2 years. Quantum electrodynamics isn't going to be born. The neutron isn't going to be discovered until the early 30s. And you're taking the wrong fight. You're saying when David Tong, here's what I really didn't appreciate about what you did. David Tong said, this is all a lie. And you took the wrong meaning from that. What David Tong was saying was different. David Tong was saying, we teach hard little ball theory, right? There's an up quark and 2 down quarks in every neutron, and 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. And they're all little hard.
Hold the fucking phone. You realize quarks have never been observed. So if someone's going to complain about a new periodic table, if that truly happened, I know he's like summarizing, paraphrasing, whatever. But if people's like main issue has anything to do with quarks, that's laughable because they've never been observed. They're purely theoretical.
little balls stuck together by rubber bands, and then we've got one electron going crazy around it. He's like, that's not what's true. And what did he say? It wasn't a lie in the sense
He said that's the best knowledge that we have.
He said, I don't know how to say the word field to a 7-year-old. They're fields. They're not hard little balls.
But that was my problem with David Tong, because here I showed him.
You don't have a problem with that.
No. The problem that I had was with his response to me. Was here I was showing him these are the wave fields that your particles sit
Every time
within.
you teach, you
that's
incur
the
a penalty.
problem. But see, that's the problem. How do you not teach when you have something new?
I'll tell you how to do it. Okay? First thing is, you try to figure out who's ethical and who isn't. I'm not kidding around with this.
You got to be Jesus Christ to figure that out. Because most people, they have a good faith.
Terrence, let me ask you a question. Have I been fair to you this time?
You've been amazingly fair.
Okay.
You've been
have I
very
been
kind.
uniformly? No, I haven't been uniformly kind.
You have. You've been honest.
Well, you're talking to me about my heart is open to you.
No,
right?
you've actually talked about the things that I've talked.
Oh, shit might just get real here for a little bit. I feel Terrence's perspective and what Eric's saying. You gotta find people who are honest. They're actually seeking answers. They don't just like casually assume they know when someone speaks to them. That's pretty much, that's like, it's almost taught. It's so universal in science that it has to be some subtle teaching that people don't even realize. They're passing on this like certainty and arrogance that the further people get into the fields, the more they pass it on and the more they absorb it, where it's very difficult to talk to those people about alternatives that they've never envisioned because they've spent so much time envisioning what they believe is true, but don't bother to look at the actual evidence that disproves what they're researching. Like plate tectonics is not true. The Big Bang is not true. Quantum mechanics is not true. General relativity is not true. Evolution, not true. The flood happened. The earth expanded. Oh, fuck. The things people are unaware of. That leads to this, like, incredulity. I don't know if I said that right. I really tried. And then people, like, present new ideas all the time. Like, a lot of them are half-baked, quarter-baked, 10% baked, unbaked. Just literally, like, the thoughts as they emerge out of someone's head, practically. That happens a lot, but sometimes they're very carefully researched. And sometimes they're in between, and even if they're wrong, like, dude, someone's spending a large amount of their time doing this because they believe in it. You will buy some lying ass advertisement that like clearly is tricking you before you will buy the truth from someone handing it to you for, here you go. That's the world we live in. You know, I'd rather support tyranny and lies than reason and logic. It's easier that way.
Talked about.
That's right.
You've given me criticism on things where I've made mistakes. You've told me where
this is
I've
not
offended
available as a
people.
service in academics.
I know.
In academics, basically, it's a closed little world, and if you don't come with protection, we stab you in the eye. This idea that Neil said about why doesn't he just heart is open to you.
No,
right?
you've actually talked about the things that I've talked about.
That's right.
You've given me criticism on things where I've made mistakes. You've told me
Okay,
where
this is
I've
not
offended
available as a
people.
service in academics.
I know.
In academics, basically, it's a closed little world, and if you don't come with protection, we stab you in the eye. This idea that Neil said about why doesn't he just submit to peer review?
We ignore you. That's the truth. We don't even bother to look at what you said and respond. You don't deserve my time. I'm busy. I'm employed to do this. Oh, look at the paycheck I'm taking home. That proves I know better. So shut your mouth, random person. I don't have time for this. Ignore. That's what we do. It's not we will stab you in the eye. We will stab you in the eye if you get popular. That's when we'll stab you in the eye. Well, first step is not stab you in the eye. First step, total disregard. Don't acknowledge your existence, your reasons, your evidence, the merit of your work. Just literally pretend that you don't exist, even if you've demonstrated your existence to them by communicating with them directly. You don't exist. Step 2, he won't go away. Oh, wow, wow, wow. This person is saying things I disagree with at a glance. Here's the things I've looked at so far that demonstrate I've considered nothing they have to say. It'll be hilarious when scientists start to rebut to my work with their piecemeal analysis. Oh, he said this one thing. Total disregard of everything else. And we'll analyze it in a vacuum so that we come out on top. Good work. Good science. Good pursuit of the truth to do the thing that makes it so you can feel you don't have to bother to consider someone else's opinion still, even in the world where they actually have to. Getting then it's stab in the eye. That's step 2. Go away. We're not saying it again. You're wrong. Here's our cursory bullshit excuse of a reason why, such as theory is quarks. Oh, blah 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 quarks. Doesn't make sense. You're using your own fucking theories that aren't true to say why some other theory isn't true. Doesn't work. No, you can't do that. Just make some shit up. Ah, fuck it. Quantum mechanics is just not true. It's that infinite scale where all systems function the same. They're just seen differently because they're seen from a different angle based on the relative mass ratio of the observer's building blocks, which we see as atoms in our case. The ones that we see as atoms in our case. Then is like relative to the mass of a star makes the sun seen as a star. The mass ratio of atoms to that system, star. The mass ratio of atoms to Earth, planet. The mass ratio of atoms to photons, light. It's all the same, though. It's just at some point, it starts to look like variation occurs because it's crossing some boundary of our actual understanding rather than some actual, like, in real aspect of reality. It's not that reality has these boundaries, it's that our understanding has these boundaries because, for instance, we don't know everything. We make a model. Like, Newton proposed all of his model without ever realizing the speed of light was not infinite. And it wasn't until old Romer demonstrated it to be finite because of observations of moons of Saturn and basically like philosophical understanding that the logic and reason of the like Enlightenment period of the time of classical mechanics was sound. So it wasn't like the logic was the problem. The problem was our lack of awareness of some detail, the speed of light, and he calculated it before we even had electricity in the world. Or we can say, logic and reason, fuck it. Let's use bullshit. That's probably better.
Well,
It's the biggest bunch of shit I've ever heard.
We've got 2 papers, the geometry of the proton. Did you get to see that?
Can we pull up the Neil stuff on that I prepared on that page? Because I cannot believe how disingenuous this is. He calls you the worst insult in academics, which is there was a study called Dunning-Kruger
effect.
is both an effect that is studied and the ultimate insult. It's basically your mama, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just click on that and see what happens.
And is basically describes modern science. Hilarious. In like every science. They're all in their own little Dunning-Kruger. It's just true.
Spent a lot of time on it. And I thought, out of respect for him, what I should do is give him my most informed critical analysis that I can. In my field, we call that a peer review. You come up with an idea, you present it either at a conference or you first write it up, and you send it to your colleagues. It is their duty to alert you of things about your ideas that are either misguided or wrong or...
He said duty. And I don't mean it like that. Like he said it is their responsibility. You know, he's saying it in some kind of like, we're doing our duty. But the reality is they're only doing their duty when Terrence Howard is the one talking, or whoever is like reaching the public sphere again, where they have to respond. Otherwise, they're doing their total disregard of what every single thing you have to say step. You don't matter step. It doesn't matter what you say. We don't care. You don't matter. Okay, fine. We'll listen. Step 2 is not so easy to get to as he presents it. It's their duty. Oh, their duty. And if he's saying Terrence Howard is colleagues, then that means we're all colleagues. And stop fucking off with this bullshit. Oh, did you have the degree? Oh, the credential? Reason to ignore everything you say? Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. That's how academics actually is. 10 years of being disregarded when I found actual discoveries. It just demonstrates that's how it actually is. It's not how he's presenting it. Whereas, it's their duty. No. He's only doing this because he got called out on Joe Rogan. He would not be doing this video otherwise. Like, he's not going to do a video reacting to any of my content, for example. Because I have also a theory of everything. I also have a periodic table. I also have a lot of things, far more things really, to my research. I have hundreds of hours of content. So, I mean, it is their duty, right? Step 1, total disregard. Until maybe like down the road, this video reaches Neil's ears when I am finally breaking this bullshit resistance. And he's like, ah, well, I guess I gotta do a response. Because of the popularity at that point. It would be riding the wave, though. It wouldn't be because it's our duty. You want to talk about duty? Let's say you found the truth. Let's just say you did. Should you live your life as you were living it, or should you do everything possible to share it with others to the point where you commit yourself to it entirely? Feel like some of us are doing our duty. Just saying. Others are basking in the paychecks. They don't have shit to do. Me, I'm under stress. Maybe if I had a paycheck, I'd be chilling too. But, one second.
Or there's the calculation that doesn't work out, or the logic doesn't comport. That's their job. Not all ideas will turn out to be correct. Most won't be, but
It's not their job, that's the problem. Their job is to do whatever the fuck their job is. It's not to respond to people like me. That is their duty as other human beings investigating the truth and putting themselves in positions of authority. If they're gonna be in positions of authority, presenting a model that has thoroughly been investigated as truth, and not listen to alternatives, in spite of the fact that the models they insist upon have been thoroughly investigated. Where other models have not been thoroughly investigated and have just been ignored entirely, in spite of the fact that they actually match the evidence far better, albeit not as accounted for because it's not being looked at by the scientific community. Okay, let's go.
But to get to that point, you need to know things like, what has everyone else said about this same subject? Am I repeating someone else's work? Is this a new insight that no one else has had, but has foundations that are authentic or legitimate or objectively true? Am I making a false assumption? Am I making an assumption that someone else has already shown to be false? All of this goes on the frontier of science. Let me make it clear that I'm delighted when I see people with active minds trying to tackle the great unknowns in the universe.
I don't really know if I want to play this part because it's probably gonna get the rest. This might get copywritten within the copyright and fucking pain in the ass. I don't agree. You can listen to Neil later. I'm gonna go past.
With his treatise, but you got the sense of it. Thanks for listening.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't risk it, Neil. I guess I can listen. I guess for the sake of listening, because he kind of mocked her like that. It was, thanks for listening, dude. You fucking. I guess that's enough. You fucking asshole. You gonna fucking skip ahead of my shit. I'm trying to say some shit. You get to say all this bullshit. I don't even get to finish what I was saying.
On the frontier of science. Let me make it clear that I'm delighted when I see people with active minds trying to tackle the great unknowns in the universe. It's a beautiful thing that people want to participate on this frontier. What can happen is, if you're a fan of a subject, let's
Notice the forward push of his hand is totally like a resistance. It's actually a literal. People want to participate, resist. However, let me hold up. What is that but resistance? We don't want you here. You're not worthy. This is for the big people involved in the deep researches. We've got the credentials, bro. Look, it's hard enough for me to have my voice heard, and I've got credentials. You don't even have them. So what the fuck? I did all this shit. Are you guys gonna fucking look or not? You're just gonna fucking make a walk, just talk around it, dude. It's like blah 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 blah. It could be fucking years of just blah 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 excuses to not look at people's work. Just fucking do it. Look, oh, we're looking at it. We're doing it on camera. Here's me looking at his work. Here's my response, and there you go. No, maybe. No offense. No offense. That's what's happening now. Like, let's see some concrete rebuttals at the end. Otherwise,
say, a hobbyist, let's call it. It's possible to know enough about that subject to think you're right, but not enough about that subject to know that you're wrong. And so there's this sort of valley in there, a valley of false confidence. This has been studied.
how many valleys you think there are? Have you looked around? I've seen some valleys. Just around, you know. I think there's only one valley, or maybe there's like modern science is in one. Yeah, dude. So, I mean, I might be in my own valley, maybe. If this is all a Truman Show thing, then I'm in a valley too. Fuck. Just getting trolled. That's a risk I take, that I'm getting trolled. You guys are just fucking hyping me up to get trolled more. That's the risk. I don't know. Otherwise, sometimes there's tops of mountains too that are just the tallest peaks on the entire planet. Shit happens.
By others, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the phenomenon where a little bit of knowledge, you over-assess how much of that subject you actually know. And then when you learn even more, you realize, no, I didn't know as much as I thought I did. So then there's a sort of a lull there. And then when you learn even more, you come back up. Ultimately, learning enough to know whether you were right or wrong. To become an expert means...
After my brilliant statement, this shit says Mount Stupid on it. Son of a bitch. Truman Show confirmed.
Means you spend all this time. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't just sit in an armchair and say, I'm now an expert. It requires years and years of study, especially looking through.
But can that studying be done in an armchair? So why are we talking shit on armchairs and people in armchairs? You gotta do the things I do. That I don't sit in armchairs all the time, so sometimes I'm not in armchairs. Dude, what about that guy that's like thinking with like that like statue? That thing, that guy's deep in thought. Like, he's probably would like to sit in an armchair, I'd imagine. You know, like they're good places of deep thought, really. So what's the problem? I get it. Maybe if you just sit in one for a moment, it doesn't like do anything. That's okay. But if you sit in one for a lot of time, not that the chair has anything to do with it, you might just come out knowing a lot of stuff.
Journals where new ideas are published and contested. That's what we have learned is the most effective means of establishing that which is objectively true. Or
Peer review is bullshit. The future will look at the papers that I tried to publish, and it will understand peer review is bullshit.
determining that which is objectively false. Both of those work hand in hand to move the needle on our understanding of the universe. I'm going to read you just my opening line here. It's titled 1 × 1 = 2.
Okay.
So I lead off.
So that was now if we go below that, what do we have? Is that let's try that.
Hi, Sir Arthur Eddington, an astrophysicist, provided the first experimental evidence for Einstein's general theory of relativity, which, by the way, was published in a peer-reviewed journal. Crazy idea. The platform to be accepted for the ideas is not social media. It is not Joe Rogan. It is not my podcast. It is research journals where attention can be given on a level.
This is kind of reminiscent of like Joe Biden, who's like, the SAFE Act must go. The SAFE Act must go. We can't have these people needing to provide evidence that they're citizens. We need the situation in our favor where all these illegal immigrants will vote for us. The only way that can happen is if we make it in our favor. So the SAFE Act is arbitrarily adding a double. People already can't vote if they're illegal aliens without being subject to the court of law. So what are we doing with this SAFE Act here? Never mind, it's providing exactly what we want. There's preventing. And in the case of peer review, it is the mechanism by which the narrative is controlled. It's not complicated. If you agree with the narrative, you want peer review to be like the way that it is established. If you see other people like me presenting other ideas that sound ridiculous because you've never heard of Dwarka, you think that the flood didn't happen because whatever reason, whether it be atheism, science has convinced you. Like, I didn't believe the flood happened until after I discovered the theory of everything and then started to research Isaac Newton's biblical research, at which point I started to research the earth geologically because I never gave a shit about geology, at which point I discovered a lot of shit about the earth and have rewritten geology because I really gave a shit and I saw the evidence. The evidence is there. I've established it. You can see me doing what I was just saying, looking at these papers and reading literally on whole videos where I'm just reading underlined statements and responding of technical papers. Like, are they doing it? Who's doing these things? No one's doing it. Unless you're excited, like energetically excited, attached, you got too close, you got pulled in. Things have happened in truth because of the actual closeness to the truth that literally consciously pulled you in to create this almost like unable to be stopped drive that's like pulling you to action. That's the only way to have done those things, which requires something pulling you in, which requires that something having substance. Albeit sometimes bullshit pulls people in, so maybe that could be argued against. That sometimes bullshit with enough substance of like filler material can pull people in, like lies from a government. Like, oh, well, we got all this substance of money, energy, power, so we'll make you do things without the thing being true. So, like, there are circumstances where there can be some kind of like energetic substance that pulls people into an idea that's not actually true, but without the propaganda bullshit and just an actual desire for truth and looking at evidence of the earth with no government intervention. Government's not getting their stupid fingers in everything. They're not in every research paper. Sure, they're in research. They're fucking with climate change and other things. But they're not messing with observations on a scale where they can actually make people think other than that which is actually true. Because they can't do that, they can only try to, but there's too much information, so they just kind of sweep it all into this paradigm that they have control of and hope that the paradigm is correct enough, that they made good enough decisions along the way, that stealing and taking everyone's money and energy and starting wars and mass genocide and vaccinating people all made perfect sense in the long term. It was totally fine. It was necessary so that the dimensions could do the thing that I was saying earlier. Clearly. Are we okay now? Sure, Fauci's. You see him trying to fucking defend. He's like throwing people under the bus. Oh shit, it's still me? This guy.
That at the end of the day offers no higher respect for your energy and intellect than by declaring that what's in it is either right or wrong or worthy of publication or not. I wanted to post this to my website so you can see my comments.
This is bullshit worthy of publication kind of thing. Dude, people need to get the fuck off their egos. Just encounter me. If your ego is like intellectually based, science based, I'm gonna humble some people. Feels good, feels good. Who's gonna humble me? I don't know, maybe. I know someone who could humble me.
Mixed in with his treatise, but you got the sense of it. Thanks for listening.
Okay. I want to be very careful about my words. Is there anything below that we put together? This is let's go above. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson, just so you don't feel bad about yourself, talking about me and my theories based on a question in an Ask Me Anything. Will you be able to talk to Eric Weinstein about the new theory of geometric unity? This is from 2013. We are all wondering about that. Cosmos is not your normal talking head documentary. In fact, it's the feature of the original that enabled the series to live for an entire generation beyond the shelf life of hundreds of other science documentaries that came afterwards. So the answer is no. Let me explain where you are. Neil is not unaware that you are never going to get your hearing in a peer-reviewed journal. Your ideas are going to come through. You're a self-taught, autodidact polymath. You haven't been cleaned up. You haven't been taught how to speak properly. You don't know the fact that when you say loop, we know fixed point. I know how to do all this stuff, right? You're not getting a peer review from me. I know a lot more than you do about a lot of this stuff. You're getting an elite review. And my elite review says that a lot of this is bathwater, but a small amount of this is baby. And that's not available anywhere. It's not available in a university. It's not available in a journal. That's available on the Joe Rogan Experience. And you know, Neil's right. If what you want is peer review, you should go to a journal, and they will laugh you out. They will take one look at your email address, and if it doesn't end in .edu, I promise you're not going to get hurt.
Do me a favor, Jamie. Can you pull up?
Let him finish.
Hold on, that because
But let him finish because this is a sustained thought.
Let's go.
It's such a fucking elitist thing. As if people who aren't like actively participating in a academic setting are not educated. It's so literally ridiculous. Genuinely bullshit. And I believe he's going to tell the story of peer review because I saw a clip and it's pretty fascinating. I saw this clip and I was like, where is that from? That must be the last hour. And we still haven't seen it, so it must be coming up soon. About the history of peer review.
Go below where we just were, Jamie. I don't think Neil deGrasse Tyson actually knows the history of peer review. This is Google Ngrams, and it tracks how often a phrase is found in the corpus of English language books published in the world. Peer review basically begins in the mid-1960s. Now, there were various forms of review. Editors, in particular, were very distinguished individuals who were chosen to not peer review things, to simply take a look at things and see who should be published and who should be not. Can we bring that back up? More or less, from what I can piece together, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, who started Pergamon Press, destroyed...
Jeffrey Epstein's Ghislaine Maxwell?
Correct. He figured out how to destroy science and make a fortune by blowing out the number of journals and forcing every university to subscribe to every journal that he could figure out how to publish, because to not subscribe to all of the journals required an admission that you had an incomplete library. So he diluted the quality of the editorship of the leading journals. This was a very informal, high-quality enterprise. Now, most of the destruction of science, in terms of how high quality it used to be, has taken place relatively recently.
Assuming what he's saying is true, I just take his word for it. I mean, it sounds like it's so easily fact-checked that it is probably true. Oh my god, I mean, this is true. Peer review doesn't show up until the 60s, so it clearly became a thing, although this is books. Not really. I mean, the word peer review in books, it doesn't even go up very much here, so I mean, maybe not the best measure, since it's such a small percentage. Also, 0.00001, like, there must be some documentation of how the process went and when it changed in a more precise way than this.
Post Robert Maxwell. Because now we have an enormous number of journals staffed by people who can't spot publication cartels where we agree to cite each other's work and we agree to publish stuff, pay for play. All of the nonsense that you see with irreproducible research comes after this peer review thing.
Like the black hole image.
Peer review thing got woven in so that people think that the scientific method and peer review are effectively the same thing, where one is an unwanted infection from the biomedical universe, which had peer review much longer than everything else. Neil is giving you a very cursory back of the hand brush off. Okay?
I felt it.
All right.
I
I'm here
accepted it.
because I love this man, and this is a higher quality environment. We have to sort out what happened with Tony Fauci and the origin of COVID. I was very distressed when Joe was sort of credulously accepting everything that you were saying at a level where he did say, look, I can't evaluate this. And he was letting you have your piece. Joe has established an extraordinary thing where he can call on a Roger Penrose. He can call on all sorts of amazing people.
He called on you.
Well, he has lapses in judgment, but he has his good quality. My point being that this is actually what science was supposed to be. We were supposed to listen to each other, not go after each other with an ice pick to the eye. We were supposed to try to figure out the best version. Remember at the beginning of this where I was trying to say, look, I want to do the best version of your idea and build it up.
So what you're saying, though, can I just summarize this? What you're saying is that Neil deGrasse's understanding of peer review is flawed.
Sure.
And that it is not really available to someone like Terrence.
It really isn't. He knows that. You see, peer review is not one thing. One thing peer review is the ability to get rid of the axe murderer who's just wandered into your office with a manuscript in red crayon.
Well, while you guys are talking this, I've got to run to the bathroom.
Go ahead. Just this alone.
It's an important point.
Yeah. Okay.
So what Joe and I were just talking about
Yeah, we're back from the bathroom break.
is what is peer review actually and why is it controversial? So imagine that you have 4 types of people, right? You've got 2 establishment figures, one of whom is screwing up the field, who's in a very powerful position and should be removed from being the impediment to progress that they are. Another person is an establishment figure who's killing it. They're the establishment because they're supposed to be the establishment. The establishment has recognized how valuable that person is. Now you got 2 other figures. You got an axe murderer who desperately feels that they've got the secret of the universe and anybody who doesn't understand them is a horrible person. Or you have a heterodox person who actually knows what they're talking about and can overturn the established order, which is where you get a revolution. Peer review just sees establishment versus non-establishment. It will lock in a terrible idea for 40 years. And it will stop somebody coming from outside. It will reapportion credit. So suddenly you do a lot of work, and somebody, this is this thing I said about gripe and swipe. We notice one flaw in your work, and we take the entire corpus that you've produced away from you, and we publish it under our own name. I can tell you a dozen terrible stories of peer review where people have confessed to using peer review as a weapon against their colleagues, particularly younger colleagues. And to simply say peer review, it works, bitches, holy cow. How can this be? I thought I was upset with some things that you had said and done. No. They're dwarfed. They're dwarfed by this. This is so disingenuous. Basically, this is saying, please submit your stuff from a gmail.com address. We'll take one look and say, it doesn't look like .edu to me. And we'll throw whatever you do in the trash heap, and we'll say, well, you got the benefit of my peer review. Now, you look at what Neil said about your stuff. And by the way, he's right about 1 times 1 equaling 1. You're wrong about that. That was your opener. You picked a terrible move. On the other hand, you heard what I said about the linchpin. It was a combination of bathwater and baby. I do not have any economic or authoritative interest in taking anything that you've done and putting it under my own name. I am simply here to help you. And when we talked about the angle and all this stuff, I can tell you that that's a great idea. It may have been had by somebody else because I don't know, but I assume it comes from you. It may not work in practice. I think it's pretty promising. And I think if you don't do anything else and you create one drone that just does that really cool thing, it'll all have been worth it.
No, we've got
No. I know.
tons of
It's
those.
not-
It's now.
You already created this. You're obviously doing cool stuff. What I'm trying to say is we in science have lost the ability to talk to people who do flawed stuff from outside. All we want to do is get rid of you. And it's because we have this fake openness. We have a fake scientific method. Peer review has nothing to do with the scientific method. We got along fine without it. Peer review isn't even peer review. It's something called peer injunction, where your peers can stop you without shorting you. I'm happy to bet against you in all sorts of things that you're doing. And if you win and I lose, I'm on an unbounded negative experience. But if I block you and I won't short you, that's saying that I think you're dangerous because it's too dangerous to go short. And the idea that we're handing old people and established people and very politically savvy people the ability to block you without shorting you is unforgivable. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to offer, I'm not pretending to be your peer. I know a lot more than you do. I'm giving you an elite review, and you're welcome. And the elite review doesn't find you as baseless as the peer review that supposedly got handed to you does. So that's, in part what I'm trying to get at is, in my field that I care about, for 40 years we've heard this unbelievable trope that only the string theory people are doing real work and everybody else isn't. And it's total hogwash. And there's no way we can get out from under these people. In the case of Anthony Fauci and Jay Bhattacharya, I was just with Jay Bhattacharya in Italy. You have this guy who has a PhD in economics, and he's a doctor, and he's a professor, and he becomes a fringe epidemiologist overnight because some bureaucrat who's probably in control of the bioweapons portfolio, because we signed these 2 treaties during the 1970s, the Geneva Convention and the Bioweapons Convention. He and Francis Collins suddenly convert a respected colleague into a fringe epidemiologist. It's like, no, we're going to have a mutiny. And the mutiny is going to be based here because this is a place that you'd invite Tony Fauci and Jay Bhattacharya.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. We could do any of that.
I bring garlic
Yeah.
We could have Michio Kaku
and
in
some
here.
crosses on the wall.
Let's have Michio Kaku and Brian Greene. Let's have a discussion about string theory. Let's fundamentally discuss neoclassical economics. Shall we discuss whether or not
I would love to see Michio Kaku, Brian Greene interacting on this subject because they're just going about their lives. They don't give a shit. And they're not ego-driven responding. They would be more sincerely responding, I believe. More sincere. I would be very interested to hear Brian Greene's response. I really like Michio Kaku, but I'm not sure. I'd also like to hear his, but
not random mutation is the true engine of neo-Darwinism? Is that reasonable? Or do some of these crazy people who say, I don't know what it is, but random mutation isn't powerful enough to build proteins because stability is too difficult. The sad fact, Joe, is that you built something that has some credibility. And even though you think of it as, I just like having conversations with people and a lot of them are fighters and I'm just a meatball, we don't have any other place. We can't go to the National Academy of Science. It's too politicized. We can't go to Harvard. You saw what just happened with Claudine Gay, who's still a professor. We've lost everything. And podcasts, as dippy and shitty and as variable in quality as they are, JRE very much included, this is all that's left. And my claim is that I'll challenge Neil. I actually think that this is a better place to do review because I'm on the hook. And by the way, some of the shit that I've said is probably wrong.
The thing that pisses everybody off is
It's a good point. He's on the hook. You can't just disregard entirely and pretend like that's a rebuttal. His rebuttal is right there.
the fact that I have the models behind what I'm talking about. When I talk about when we describe the electric field or the plasmic field, I've got models that define every aspect of that motion, and I'm waiting for it to be reviewed.
I will show you.
I would love that. I would love that.
I'll take some of your money.
I would love that. I would love that.
But I'll also try to help make it better.
But it's having the proof. And then, mind you, like Jamie, if you pull up the...
But Terrence, you know what he's saying about like not being an expert in teaching and then coming from the outside, and that it's insulting. It's
insulting.
It's insulting. It's a bad way to approach a concept because the people that have been studying these concepts for so long instantaneously are told that they don't know, but you know, and that's offensive to people that are actual experts in a thing. I think the same ideas could be portrayed in a way that does not do that.
I have to learn that nomenclature.
It's just you're so much smarter than most of the people.
Grow a thicker skin. Dude, you're in the game. You gotta know. This ain't no, like, child's play. You're in the game. We're discussing what is true. If you feel offended because people are pointing out the fact that you don't necessarily know more because of your position, and the position is becoming an actual issue because that's what's being measured to determine whether or not you get to speak. It's a real thing that people are experiencing. So if you're offended because you're going about your life, la 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 la, and suddenly, for a split second, you interact with someone whose entire life is dedicated to research that this world is unaware of. Just trying to finish.
Who you're talking to.
Well,
That's what the problem
and this is one of the failures of Joe's bullshit detector. In other words, you believe what you're saying, and you're obviously very, very smart, and you obviously have a huge amount of things that you've been introduced to. Like, how many other people bring up Hermann Grossman and geometric algebra and Clifford? I think I'm probably the only other one in the history of this program to do that, right?
When I saw you mention Clifford algebra, I was like, okay, there's a commonality.
Right. Now, Sean Carroll for sure knows what a Clifford algebra. I'm not sure whether Neil deGrasse Tyson does. Brian Greene certainly does. But in general, this stuff doesn't get introduced in places like this. And then, and you watch this in yourself. I'll try to put a circuit in your mind so you'll know exactly the point where you start pissing my community off. Can we bring up the cruel tutelage of Pai Mei?
What's that?
I love chick flicks, and I think the ultimate...
That's the problem. We're humans. Humans in position of authority who need to be, like, basically sucked off so that they don't feel offended. That's the problem. Oh, can I speak now?
The chick flick, Joe.
It sounds like my ex-wife.
I'm seeing you there watching Legally Blonde. I'm seeing you right now with your socks on.
Let's go. Let's go earlier than this.
Is that from Kill Bill?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I can't show this. That's why we can't.
Yeah.
You gotta be more specific. I can't show this stuff on YouTube.
Well, the bride goes up to the top of these stairs.
Okay.
And Pai Mei asks her, "What do you know?" And she says something like, "I am acquainted with such and such so-and-so, and I'm more than proficient in the fine art of Japanese whatever." And Pai Mei completely kicks her ass because she doesn't understand where she is. And my claim is that you need your ass kicked. and you need to apprentice to some of us who know more than you. And believe me, let me just tell you this. I've had my ass kicked, and I will get my ass kicked more because you need some kind of humility. You're coming across wrong. By the way, never pick a fight with Jamie Foxx. Holy shit, is that guy good at everything?
I learned that the hard way.
Jamie, if you're out there, I totally love you, and what you did in Ray is just unbelievable. But that
He
guy,
does it in every movie.
he's so damn good.
Yeah, he's an insanely talented.
He's an insanely
person.
talented person.
He's one of the most intelligent people I've met. I was sitting on the set of Ali with him, and I'm playing chess with him, and I'm playing a serious game of chess. He's having a conversation with 2 other people while he's playing chess with me, as if it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I play chess well. So I've never been more impressed with somebody who can compartmentalize, and he's an organizational genius.
He's whatever he is. But you know what? I had my guy. My guy was named Noam Elkies. I don't know if
Noam Elkies,
you
no.
never heard of Noam Elkies. Noam Elkies. I entered Harvard at 19 with a master's degree. Noam was 18. He didn't have a master's degree, so we were sort of in a weird way neck and neck. And everything that I thought I was good at, Noam was better. Noam, I played a little piano. Noam could compose anything. I mean, this guy's just like a super genius beyond genius, right? And he wasn't a bad guy at all, but he was so powerful in his mind that like he composed, I think, an 11 by 11 crossword with no black squares. I don't know, stuff that just can't be done. And I thought, well, geez, there's just no point in competing with Noam Elkies. And one Christmas party, the professor named Raoul Bott heard me trying to play boogie woogie piano. And Noam sat down and like Raoul said, well, why don't you play us some boogie woogie? And Noam started playing what he thought was boogie woogie. It was like Rachmaninoff. And Raoul would say, no. And Noam would go into Chopin, and then he'd go into Liszt. He was playing ever more brilliant things. And finally, his brain just blew because he couldn't think through boogie woogie. But Noam then became the youngest professor in the history of Harvard University. And I realized that I had accidentally entered in a year in which a Noam Elkies was present. And by having my ass kicked repeatedly by this guy, I had to ask myself the question, well, what am I doing on this planet? What do I have to contribute? And all the things I see Jamie Foxx doing, he's not trying to do anything like this, right? There's a creative spark and a spirit in you that I really see and appreciate. And it comes from an older era, and we don't have people like you in the academy anywhere. We used to have lots of these polymaths who would connect fields. And right now what we've got is a specialization epidemic. And as far as I can tell, what you need is some discipline. And you need discipline from coming into contact with people who know a lot more than you, who can educate you as to what we already understand, how to communicate those things.
Oops. Oops. There's a bunch of people hyper-educated in one topic with no awareness of why that topic could be standing on a house of cards. Oops.
And not just shut him down.
It's
that's
what
the
happened.
thing. And the epidemic we have is assassins. We have an assassin epidemic because the midwits in the system, all they do is see things in terms of like Dunning-Kruger. The funny part about it is that that's the midwits endpoint, is that they see heterodox thinkers and they can't figure out how to place them. And so they just say, if I can find one error, I can reject everything. And you keep triggering that. And that's
with
why
the
you
one
are where you
times
are.
one, but that's why I keep saying the 1 times 1 is more of a
It's
metaphor.
not a metaphor to us. It is life and death. You try to sneak 1 times 1 through airport security. It's just a Glock 19.
I understand that, but it was really to gain the attention.
They never do it.
To gain the attention.
Listen, you didn't
of
know, and now
something
you
is
know.
wrong.
Well, okay,
It's that
there's
simple.
one more that's going to keep us from ever getting you through this thing. Can we pull up my page again?
We're going to wrap it up with this one.
Yeah, I want to do this. It'll be a little bit.
Before and
But we didn't even do the
Terrence,
lynchman.
Terrence,
we're
there's
so
more-
far
okay.
down the road.
This is 4.5 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want you to take a look at the chemical engineering PhD, because if we don't do that, I can't actually help you.
No, that right there.
Talk to me.
Let me explain that.
Yeah.
Here I took over to what was the name of the university? South Carolina University.
Yeah.
I was working with Apollo diamonds. We were growing diamonds. And I developed a way in which to grow diamonds larger than the 2-carat diamonds. I went over to South Carolina University and I talked to them about introducing the diamond process, into their university. They were going to give me an honorary degree.
Okay.
Now I'm thinking they're giving me an honorary degree in chemical engineering because of what I'm doing, and it's just an honorary degree in humanities that they gave me. And so I went on the show and I was like, yeah, well, I got an honorary degree from them. But that ended up coming across as if I got an honorary degree in chemical engineering, which I don't have an honorary degree in chemical engineering.
Assume you did. An honorary degree.
It's worthless.
It's like, would you take if your child needed brain surgery? Would you go to Dr. Dre?
No.
Okay. Here, I want you to hold this. As a guy who was 19.
That's not fair to the potential that someone could, theoretically, become the best brain surgeon of all time of their own volition if they were so dedicated and focused on such a goal. Certainly, I don't know how they would get there, but the road may be long and hard to ever go from never doing it to doing it, even if they did a bunch of research beforehand. But, I mean, it doesn't mean it's not possible. I don't think that the medical industry is a good judge of who's actually a good doctor. I mean, they're not with COVID. At this point, the medical industry is hijacked with bullshit, so it's hard to say. I mean, you can just see a bunch of people agreeing in doctor positions to tyranny. It just goes to show they don't necessarily know anything. So the fact is, like, yes, it means something, but it also means nothing. It's not, so since it could mean nothing, it essentially like leans towards meaning nothing. It shouldn't add any value. The only thing that should really matter is the words and the evidence and the reasonings and everything that they're actually saying, that they're bringing forth to the discussion purposely, not just their background as some merit-based thing.
19 with a master's degree. Harvard University and I got into a fight. And it took me 7 years to get that away from them. And they would have been happy to bury me without it. Okay? That is blood, sweat, and tears. And the work that I actually started doing ended up in somebody else's name because Harvard University in part credited with them with it.
That's the peanut person?
When you screw around with a PhD, like this Claudine Gay, this.
That's how it goes. They do that fucking unethical bullshit, just stealing your work. Oh, well, it happened to me. It's kind of like an abusive parent who was abused as a child. Just propagating the same bullshit. Oh, well, I need to get my career on the up and up, so I got this brilliant young kid willing to put my name first on his work. He's doing perfect. Sweet. Oh, yeah, I'll fix the typos. It's the Dylan, okay? Better. Put my name first? Okay, good. All right, everything's good now.
This woman needs to be fired, okay? Harvard University needs to go back to the business of kicking ass and taking names and being the place that is the shining city on the hill. Enough with the anti-Semitism, enough with the woke, enough with the DEI.
Harvard had their time in the sun, bro. They ain't gonna be the next up-and-comer when they're falling. The next up-and-comer is gonna be a university that truly, like, starts anew with a new system that actually makes fucking sense and isn't abusive of the children, actually understands the world and isn't like, yeah, you know, sucks to be you probably can't pay this back, we know that, but you don't, you're just gambling, you're young enough, you don't give a shit, the effects won't matter till your option of making this decision is long gone.
Don't ever let me catch you talking about Jim Crow mathematics. You're getting absolutely treated seriously for the serious stuff that you've done. You're getting treated properly for the wrong stuff. That thing about the PhD, it's basically fraud. What I'm saying to you is, I don't give a shit. Merit is merit. If I can catch you in a fraud, if I can catch you in a lie, I can catch you in an error, I don't care. My question is, what did you do? What was the cool stuff you did do? I'm not an assassin. I don't care if you, in part, exaggerated your achievements. I know what it feels like to be shat on. I know that you have no ability to fight what's being said to you from on high. Okay? What I'm saying is, the only thing that matters is what you contribute in the end. And imagine that there was fraud, imagine that there were lies, imagine that there were errors. And imagine that the linchpin turns out to be the next level drone that defines everything because accidentally there are 6 degrees of freedom and there's 6 dimensions in the semi-direct product of SO3 with R3, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's that cool. Gregor Mendel probably faked his Peapod experiments. And there's a guy named David E. Kaplan at Johns Hopkins University who said to me something, it's so beautiful I can't reproduce it. He said, physics is based on everything. It's the backstabbing, it's the frauds, it's the geniuses, it's the craftsmen and the workmen who get the job done, the experimentalists who toil on papers with 1,000 people. And this community of all of these people have come together to produce something which is something close to the source code of the universe. And if you're interested in that pursuit and you want to get rid of some of the baby fat and some of the bullshit, I'm happy to help. There's a lot of work to do it. It happens that I had done a lot of the work over my life, so I didn't have to put an infinite amount of energy into this. But what happened is that you created a mass delusion. And it was a mass delusion in part because we're not aware of what mass delusions actually are. They start with a nub of truth. They start with creative sparks of genius. So we're on the lookout for people who are just frauds, who have nothing that they actually can contribute. And what we don't realize is that you have these things about kayfabe, which are these melanges of reality and fakery, right? And they're interwoven. What you've produced is something that is part bullshit and part real contribution. And we don't have a system to pull it apart, and we don't have any experience for how to sense when that's what's going on.
But they consider the bullshit to be the 1 times 1 equaling 2. And the 97 patents, the supersymmetry.
It's not the 97 patents, it's not the supersymmetry. It's simply the residue, the reduction of when we get rid of all the stuff that wasn't supposed to be here because you're a self-taught polymath. You're obviously incredibly intelligent. You're obviously not taught by the system. And you can't do that work all on your own.
No.
So you got to come in and you got to find somebody who's not looking to kill you.
And that's been the entire dance. What I've tried to do is introduce a new set of tools to the scientific and mathematical community so that they can advance past the Platonic solids. It's the Platonic solids I still see in a 2 or 3 dimensional position. And since we are living in hyperspace and hyperbolic reality, then we need to have tools that define that hyperbolic space so we don't have to go through Lorentz transformations and all of these unnecessary steps in order to get to defining curved space.
I think that the real story, Terrence, is going to be whether you can stop teaching long enough to accept some help.
I'm here to accept the help.
And I'm here to learn from you because I'll tell you something. The linchpin is a good example of something which I didn't know. And to the extent that I did know it, I threw it away. And I think it's a great idea. And I think that the art, and I think that some of the higher dimensional stuff, and I think that a lot of this stuff has a kind of beauty that if John Horton Conway were still alive and hadn't been killed by COVID, I'd know where to send you. There's a guy, there are sphere packing people, there are combinatorists, there are all sorts of people who play with stuff in this realm. But the one thing that you've got to stop doing is that when you get on a program that has millions of people, you can't create one more mass delusion. I've got a Fauci mass delusion, I've got a string theory mass delusion, I've got a Biden is fine mass delusion, I've got a Trump is not a problem mass delusion. All I have, morning, noon, and night, is mass delusion on mass delusion. But people don't understand that the reason that these mass delusions get started is that there's a nub of truth in them. QAnon can't be total bullshit because it's got some core in it that's right and some craziness. If you think about Dianetics and Scientology, the first thing that they teach you about is the reactive mind. That's not a terrible theory. And then before you know it, it's Xenu and volcanoes, right? So what's going on is that people are not aware of how kayfabe works, right? Mm-hmm. Wrestling is one of the most dangerous, demanding sports of a certain kind. Now, it happens to be theatrical and pre-programmed. But if you've ever dealt with anybody, like the wrestling community suffers a death rate unlike any other sport in the world. What you have to understand is that kayfabe, and I highly recommend you look at my essay from 2011, is about what happens when fantasy and reality intermingle. And that's what you did on the last time that you were here. And I can talk to you about the fantasy, I can talk to you about the fraud and the lies, but I'm also going to talk to you about the contributions, the genius, and the insight. And what I want the world to learn is you're getting sucked into mass delusions that you're not properly imagining. There's almost always a core of truth and reality that the mainstream won't acknowledge. And then there's almost always a bullshit payload that gets leavened in because in some sense the mainstream is our official cult. And then all of the rest of us produce these other cults. And in my situation, I've gone 40 years and I haven't had a really deep conversation about GU, geometric unity, with my own community. Where you are is that you're in a world in which the number of people who are both competent and honest and ethical enough.
I sent him a literal response to his paper, to which he did not respond, so it's his own choice to not have such conversations.
To have the conversation with you is dwindling to fewer than 10. It's been a pleasure and an honor to appear with you. Thanks for being a decent guy. I know that not all of this has been welcome.
This has all been welcome. Any truth. And like I said, I take you up on examining and exploring these into the areas because, like I said, these are tools. I just want to offer a new set of tools to that community.
Okay, dudes, I gotta go. That was the end of my reaction. I mean, it was good, but hopefully I scattered my opinion in this video enough. He made some good points there at the end in regard to the way things are. And I agree, there's certainly we can just kind of like iron out the details and kind of incorporate the details from Terrence's or anyone else's work into a future understanding. All right, peace, I'm out.